Good morning, YouTube Live. Mm, How's it going, everybody? This is yours truly, Rama Screen, covering movies, TV, and entertainment. Right now is Thursday morning, May 2nd, uh, around 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. And I'm here to give you my live review of the all-new Marvel Cloak and Dagger new episode that's going to be airing tonight, uh, I believe 8 p.m., and it's on Freeform. And I love this show. I can talk about this show for hours and hours, but I'm gonna try to keep it under 30 minutes or less. Um, just a heads up, like with most of my TV reviews and episode recaps, I'll be spilling some spoilers, but I'll be keeping the major reveal at the end under wraps. All right. Um, the spoilers is mostly context, synopsis, giving you what or describing you what takes place in this episode, and also recapping some of what happened last week's episode. So that's the extent of the spoilers. So heads up, this review is mainly for those of you, my fellow Marvel Cloak and Dagger fans who have also or who are also caught up with the show. Um, if you ask me, hey Rama, why do you do Marvel Cloak and Dagger reviews in the morning instead of in the evening when it airs? The answer to that is mostly because in the evenings I usually have screenings. I have press screenings. Like tonight I'm attending the press screening of Netflix new movie Wine Country at the Landmark Theater in downtown Los Angeles. So that's why I'm not able to do reviews of Cloak and Dagger on Thursdays evenings. It has to be right now in the mornings. So that's my answer to you. Um, so let's get right to it. Now, first of all, I want to thank Freeform and Marvel Television for granting me the screener to this episode. I appreciate it, Marvel Television and Freeform. Um, so what happened in last week's episode, my fellow fans? If you recalled, and this is not a spoiler anymore because you already seen last week's episode. By the end of it, um, Tandy Bowen got tased, got tased by Leah. Turns out Leah is bad, and Leah puts her in the ambulance. Turns out that Leah is part of the trafficking ring. Um, Now, of course, it leaves you wondering, like, okay, is she the boss? Is she just the henchman? Is Leah just, the underling, like the second right hand person to the boss? We don't know yet, right? So that's what this episode answers. This episode tonight, that airs tonight, which I've already seen, reveals who the actual boss, the big bad guy, the main villain, uh, who's responsible for this human trafficking, kidnapping girls, trafficking them across the city. So I'm not gonna reveal to you who that is. All right, you're gonna have to find that out for yourself when you watch the episode tonight. But what happens in today's episode or tonight's episode is the the reason why I love. I think I'm a big fan. Okay, here's how I put it. This season 2, episode 6, titled B Sides, is probably my favorite episode of this entire season 2 thus far. I kid you not. And the reason is I've mentioned to you that if you know me well, you know that my favorite stories are the ones about hallucinations, going down the rabbit hole, um, asylum, when we're or dreamscapes, or like seeing visions of as the characters are spiraling down to madness. So things that are not things don't things are not what they appear. Those kinds of situations. That's what this episode offers. So instead of picking up where last week's episode left off, with Tandy in the ambulance, and then instead of seeing, okay, what happens next. Yeah. This episode kind of explores what's going on inside the mind of Tandy while she's on that gurney, inside that ambulance. And three scenarios happen in this episode of what's going on in her mind. Um, if if you remember last week's episode, uh, she tells this story of a farmer and a viper, and it ends with like she's giving a toast at a party for Tyrone, and Tyrone is dressed up in a uniform. And so this episode kind of is a continuation of that. You see that part, you see that same party, and then you see, every character there, right? If Avita, even Tandy's dad shows up, and even Tyrone's brother, the one that got shot by Connors, he shows up. So it's as if it's an alternate reality. It's as if that it's a reality or semi far reality where Tandy's dad never drowned, and Tyrone's brother Billy never got shot, and it's all fine and well now. And Tyrone is becoming this cop for the New Orleans city, and so it's a congratulations party. Congratulations, you're a cop party, and but it you can tell even throughout this first scenario, Tandy senses like, wow, something's not right with this. I feel like there's something that's just out of place, you know. But she doesn't get the full sense that's not real. That's just a dream. That's just uh, her mind playing tricks on her. So then she goes to a convenience store with Tyrone, and apparently there's these two redneck racist guys making stupid comments about Tandy and Tyrone. And at one point, it gets almost to a conflict, and Tyrone and Tandy touch each other, and then of course their power kind of connect. The cloak and the dagger, and then the second scenario happens. The second scenario um, is set at Roxxon Oil Rig. Roxxon, of course, is the company that Tandy's dad works for. Do you remember in season one, Tandy was trying to uncover the conspiracy behind, you know, her dad's or the explosion, as you said, the conspiracy behind the explosion with regards to Roxxon. Now, in this scenario, Tandy is an engineer for Roxxon, and she gets shipped to this oil rig to fix their problem. They are having a problem. And Tyrone and Billy both work at the oil rig. And guess who also works there? Mina. Mina shows up, and she's this tough as nail boss who is offended at the fact that the son of Nathan Bowen, genius Nathan Bowen, Tandy Bowen, is I guess you could say Mina doesn't like Tandy telling her like, oh, there's something wrong with your facility or with your oil rig. Mina, in this scenario, Mina's character is one of those bosses who is just insecure, and she busts balls. And I love Mina in this one. She's and she uh what's the word I'm looking for here? Um she gets defensive when you try to tell her some facts. You should check out Mina in this one. Um and that's the second scenario. It ends with the scenario ends with the rig at a almost like about to blow up. And of course Tyrone and Tandy touch hands each other again. Of course, their power kind of repelled them again. Cloak and dagger. And then you go to the third scenario. Now, the third scenario um, is set. The third scenario finds Tandy on the streets of New Orleans, trying to collect signature for her cause. I think it's to save shorebirds or something like that. And And at one point, she steals this guy's wallet, and so she runs, and she encounters Tyrone, who is who's jacking a car. Like he's in the process of stealing this car. So she goes into the car, and she says, "Hey, drive, drive." Tyrone's like, "What are you doing here?" You know, because they don't know each other. It's like in the scenario, it's like, "Oh," and um, and so they drive away from the cop and the guy whose wallet that Tandy stole from. Um, and so in the car, as they're driving, you see Tandy kind of keeps like touching her arm, like she itches and all. And she again she senses like there's something wrong, like I'm not supposed to be here. And you could throughout the three scenarios, excuse me, you see flashes of images of, but not the whole picture, but just bits of piece of flashes of images of the ambulance. Maybe you see the ambulance lights. Maybe you see the ambulance that rectangle two windows thing, and maybe you see a piece or like a part of the gurney. So it's like those flashes or that reality. It's as if that reality is trying to break through to Tandy. It's trying to tell Tandy, the scenario that you're in right now, that's just a dream. That's your mind playing tricks on you. You're actually on the gurney in the ambulance. Wake up, get back to the thing. And and so that's what continues to happen throughout these three scenarios. She keeps sensing like, what is it? I'm seeing things that aren't there. Like, so in the car, she basically talks to Tyrone about that. And at one point, you know, she's like, Ty, and Tyrone's like, I didn't give you my name. So obviously there's something wrong with that quote unquote reality that she's in. Um, and of course, I don't want to reveal to you what happens after that because that would go into the major spoiler territory. But let me just give you some clue, at least, of what you can anticipate. Um, what happens after that third scenario? Um, you will see who the big bad villain is, the main villain, the big bad guy, and you will see, or you will come to understand um, his connection to um, Roxanne's past. Let me just put it that way. I don't want to reveal too much because that would be really spoiling the fun for you. Um, so that's what happens in this episode. Now, here's some of my thoughts about it. First of all, I freaking love the song that they have for this episode. I mentioned to you many times, and you, my fellow Cloak and Dagger fans, would know that the show often uses songs, right? Um, Many of which are not that mainstream, but songs that would accompany the scenes, whatever scenes they are at hand. And so it often feels like a music video, some of those sequences. It could be action, it could be melodrama. In this one, there's only one song that they use, and that is a hymn, a church hymn, very classic one. It's called "In the Sweet By and By." Now, I grew up in a conservative Christian family in Asia, so I'm very familiar with this church hymnal song, "In the Sweet By and By." So, what is fascinating about the way it is used in this episode is that you go through different renditions of "In the Sweet By and By." Um, you go through the piano one, the classic piano version, right, in the first scenario, and then there's in the second scenario you hear this "In the Sweet By and By" in a country folk kind of style, like really classic, like ancient country folk, maybe 1930s, 1940s style. And then in the third scenario, you see or you hear "In the Sweet By and By" done in hip hop style, or R&B. I should say R&B style. And and then the very last, right after the big bad guy is revealed in the Sweet By and By, um, that they use is the version that Johnny Cash did. And Johnny Cash is the man. So Johnny Cash singing gospel is always welcome. Um, so I love that. I love that. In the Sweet By and By is one of my favorite church hymns. I'm not religious anymore, not as much as or not as strict as I used to be when I was a kid. But every time I hear church hymns like this one, it does bring back good memories. It gives me all the feels. Especially, this is one of my. This is I think I think this song is a favorite to many uh, churchgoers out there. There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar. For the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. Another favorite hymn of mine, a church hymn song of mine, is actually It Is Well With My Soul. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. I'm not the greatest singer, I apologize, but I love it. I love it. So the fact that they use it is awesome, and that's my first note. Um, the second one is that uh, remember in my interview with Olivia Holt at WonderCon, I asked Olivia like, when are we, the fans, gonna get to see Tandy and Tyrone as a romantic couple? And of course, Olivia Holt. And you can watch my interview with Olivia Holt here on Rama Screen YouTube channel. Olivia Holt kind of like, yeah, right now they're enjoying being best friends. They have bigger fish to fry right now. Uh, but judging from this episode, uh, clearly that the writers are setting it up for season two to lead to that, to potentially Tandy and Tyrone being a couple, because in this episode, excuse me, um, you get the idea that Tandy really genuinely cares about Tyrone, like not like brother sister kind of care, like really really care, like Tyrone is her, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's the yang to her yin. So if anything happens to Tyrone, Tandy breaks down. So that's what this episode suggests, that the two are inseparable. I'm theorizing that I think if by the end of season two that they're not romantically involved as a couple, that they at least by the end of season two at least have some feelings toward that. Have some feelings like, wow, not only do we need each other, that we actually really, really genuinely care. Because there's some moments also in this episode where Tyrone also shows that that genuine compassion, and really, like, there were times when in this episode when she's like, what's wrong, what happened, like 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 somebody who, when you see somebody who really cares for somebody, and the other person is hurt, and it really hurts him or her when that other person is suffering. That's the look, that's the impression that these characters give me in this episode. So that's another note that I have. The second note, the third note is is this whole dreamscape of three scenarios. It reminds me of what happened in season one. Do you remember, my fellow Cloak and Dagger fans? In season one, there was this episode where something similar to this. It's a going down the rabbit hole. Things are not what they appear. So Tyrone goes through this three possible outcomes, right? Um, with regards to his reaction to Connors. I think one of them is involving a gun, and one of them is involving a rope, as in like hanging oneself. Um, while that happens, Tandy is faced with her possible outcomes when she um, when she sees her dad in some kind of a conference room setting meeting with a bunch of Roxxon people behind a glass, and she's in the woods. Remember that episode? So so this episode reminds me of that, where but this episode is mostly Tandy centric. So Tandy is doing her best with all her powers, or all her strength, I should say, trying to discern like what's going on, trying to discern, um, and ultimately decide who really matters in her life the most. And so I'm going to leave that at that, because if I say more, then it would really reveal the major third act in this episode. But I love that. I love that. So this is a Tandy centric episode. And again, it's dreamscape, hallucination kind of thing, mind playing tricks on you. But it's a necessary one. It's not a filler episode. Some people might see this and like, wow, why can't they just pick up where the ambulance left off and go from there? Like, why do we need to go inside the mind of Tandy Bowen? Like, why dedicate this one whole episode for that? But I think you will come to understand once you've seen this episode that it's not a filler episode, that it actually is this whole thing plus the revelation at the end, or the reveal at the end. This whole thing is important to the evolution of the character Tandy, um, coming to the realization of not only who the bad guy is, but again who she genuinely cares in her life, that she would sacrifice her life for. And of course that goes to what I said earlier about, I think the writers are setting it up slowly but surely for Tandy and Toan to end up being a couple someday, soon enough down the road. And this episode is a big indicator of that. So those are my points that I have for today's episode. The notes that I have. Again, another great. This is my favorite episode in this entire season 2. I love it. I'm marking it right now. I'm pinning it. Like, this is my favorite. And next week, when I give you my live review of next week's episode, by that time you have already seen today's episode. So next week we'll discuss about the spoilers, the big reveal in today's episode next week. All right, and then we'll discuss it then. That's it. Thank you so much for tuning in on this special live review of today's Cloak and Dagger all new season 2 episode 6, titled B-Sides, which is a very fitting title if you are familiar with like records or vinyl or cassette tapes or CD. Hey, flip it to the B side and play that music again. And share your thoughts in the comment section below if you have already seen this episode. Do you agree or disagree with my assessment? Let me know your thoughts down below. And subscribe. Press that like button, ring that bell. And if you can help support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/ramascreen. Okay, you guys, I have a busy day ahead of me today. I got 3 reviews to prep, 2 of which I will be posting later for you guys. So stay tuned for those. And thanks so much for tuning in. Let's rock this.